Good evening. We will call our Planning Commission meeting for July 14th to order.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll call the roll. Mariah Bishop.
Here.
Ralph Carson.
Here.
Philip Jefferson.
Here.
Jihan Hodges.
Here.
Ben Mills.
Here.
Sherry Phillips.
Here.
And Michael Voyland.
Here.
That's 7 members present.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a special evening because Ms. Phillips will be rolling off of our commission tonight. We want to share with you how much your voice on this commission has been so important to the town of Garner and to us.
Thank you.
And you will be deeply missed. But know that you can always return after a certain point. And we hope to welcome you in the audience at any time that you have feedback for us. And if there's anything that you see that the commission needs to do better, you know what that looks like.
I do. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate my time. I appreciate Jeff. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And, to the commissioners, you guys are incredible. And I tell everybody all the time, about the planning department and the work, a lot of the work that goes into what goes on, what you see, around the town of Garner. I said, don't take it for granted because it is a lot of work and those guys they're incredible. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
On. There we go. Maybe I just need to speak into it a little more carefully. Okay. But we do have a little going away present for you, a little plaque commemorating your 2 terms of service from 2021 to 2025. And we will also let you take your nameplate with you as well. Okay. So yeah, and then I think we have somebody that we're ready to appoint. And I'm sure, Mayor, would you like to say anything or give her a shake on the way out?
We've already talked. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherry.
And Sherry, it's been a pleasure to serve with you, and thank you for all your support and your years on the Planning Commission, and we're definitely going to miss you.
Thank you so much. I will miss you guys as well, but I'll be watching online. Definitely. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
And I'll be out in the audience.
Thank you, Sherry.
Next on our agenda, on our item of agendas, are our swearing in of our new appointed and reappointed members, and which has already been done previously. So at this time, we would like to welcome our new commission member forward, Mr. Shane Banks. You can take any of the 2 seats if you like. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you to the commission.
Thank you.
And I will say, Mr. Banks, as you take your role, feel free to ask us any questions. Starting out, as always, a lot of new words and phrases and the commentary. So we are here to help you.
Thank you.
Just like we help each other.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you.
It is now, we are at the stage where we need to elect our officers for the commission chair and vice chair. So typically we ask for nominations from the commission. I will say I'm happy to serve in this role if you would like. I believe that Mr. Carson is also happy to serve in that role. But if anyone else would like to serve in one of these roles, you're welcome to also nominate yourselves, but we would need an official nomination for Mr. Carson as vice chair or an official nomination for Mr. Jefferson as chair, unless there is someone else that would like to also put their name into.
I'll nominate Mr. Jefferson for the position of chairman again.
Well, thank you. I accept that nomination.
And I will nominate Mr. Ralph Carson for vice chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a nomination for chair and vice chair. So now we will vote on those. Unless there are any other nominations, please do feel free to nominate anyone else on the commission, any of those roles. Seeing none.
So there's a nomination on the floor to nominate Mr. Carson for vice chair. I think we'll call a vote. We'll go down our list here. Shane Banks.
Do we have to have a second for both of them?
Do we need a second? Yes. Do we
Yes.
have a second?
So we need a second for the nomination of chair.
We had Jihan Hodges nominate Mr. Carson for vice chair. Do we have a second?
I will second that nomination.
Thank you, Mr. Boyland. There's a motion, motion and a second to elect Mr. Carson for vice chair. I'll call the vote. Shane Banks.
Aye.
Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jihan Hodges.
Aye.
Ben Mills.
Aye.
And Michael Boyland.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. Mr. Carson, you have been reelected vice chair.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Carson to nominate Mr. Jefferson for chair. Do we have a second?
I will second that also.
Mr. Boylan, thank you for that. We have a motion and a second to nominate Mr. Jefferson as chair, and I will call the vote again. Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Mr. Carson.
Aye.
Mr. Jefferson.
Aye.
Ms. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Mills.
Aye.
Mr. Boyland.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. Mr. Jefferson, you have been re-elected chair of our planning commission. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I hope we serve this season as well as we can for Town of Garner. At some point, my role will be up, and there will be new people to come into this role. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. I feel like one of our former chairs would say the same thing. It is time for our invocation. I'll be happy to share that. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to serve as another season for Town of Garner, to do the work that we have been tasked to do. We ask that we are watched over this evening as we do the work of Town of Garner, and we think about all of those that are in need in our town, especially those that have gone through major natural disasters recently, from our storms, flooding. And we ask that we do all that we can to support our neighbors and our communities and in our Town of Garner, and that the work that we do will not affect any of our residents. We thank you for all that you do for us. In your name, amen.
Amen.
We need to adopt our agenda. Are there any items on our agenda that need to be updated or revised? If none, do we have a motion to adopt our agenda as written?
I'll move that we adopt the agenda as written.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Boylan. We have a motion and a second to adopt our agenda.
There's a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. I'll call the vote. Shane Banks.
Aye.
Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jihan Hodges.
Aye.
Ben Mills.
Aye.
Michael Boyland.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted.
Thank you. We have adopted our agenda. Our meeting minutes from our May 12th meeting are in front of you. Are there any changes that need to be made to our meeting minutes from May 12th? Anybody see anything that needs to be revised? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve our meeting minutes from May 12th?
I'll move that we adopt the minutes of the May 12th, 2025 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes, and I'll call the vote. Shane Banks,
Aye.
Mariah Bishop,
Aye.
Ralph Carson,
All right,
Philip Jefferson,
Aye.
Jehan Hodges,
Aye.
Ben Mills,
Aye.
and Michael Boyland.
Aye.
The minutes are approved, 7-0.
Thank you so much. We have approved our meeting minutes. We can now move on to our older new business. CZMP 24006 Creech Road Homes.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone and members of the public. My name is Erin Joseph, and I will present the rezoning case CZMP 24-006, also known as Creech Road Homes. So this is a Tier 2 rezoning request, conditional rezoning request to rezone 42.4 acres of land located in the ETJ from rural agricultural to residential 4 conditional for the development of 37 single-family detached units. The site is located, as I stated, in the ETJ, and it's located on the east side of Creech Road between Jewel Street and Plaza Drive. Rural agricultural, the existing zoning district, is intended for larger lot, rural residential living, agricultural and silvicultural uses. It's typically found in areas outside of the town's corporate limits where water and sewer is not readily available. Currently, the site is primarily vacant land, but at least one of the current lots has a single-family home on it. Creech Road is a major collector road. It serves as a vital connection between residential neighborhoods, schools, and commercial areas. If you notice the map on the screen, you do have an activity center. To the northwest, you have the neighborhood activity center, and then to the southeast at Jones Sausage Road, you have the regional employment center. The most recent NCDOT traffic counts has this portion of Creech Road at 5,598. And actually, I'll update that number. 2024 data is out, and so currently it is actually at 5,777 as of 2024 annual average daily traffic. But it is continually showing a upward trajectory from 4,500 trips in 2015. The applicant has narrowed the permitted uses to 1 out of 14. They have narrowed it to single-family detached with a maximum of 37 dwelling units. The average lot size within the proposed development is 12,000 square feet. And outside of the narrowed permitted use table, the applicant has proffered conditions that are addressing specific guidelines for site design, architectural standards, and open space and recreation within the development. Regarding site design, the maximum density has been capped at 1 dwelling unit per acre. There are trails for pedestrian connectivity and also enhanced landscaping along a portion of Creech Road. Architectural standards, they are committing to a variety in front elevations, specific building materials. They've listed size of the porches and window and garage features. They also have committed to a percentage of the units with first floor primary bedrooms. With the open space and recreation, the active open space will include a playground. There are 2 greenway trail connections, 10-foot trail connections to the proposed public greenway that traverses the northern boundary of the site. And they are committing to at least 1 amenity, such as a dog park, picnic tables, outdoor games, or pickleball courts. On the screen, you have the proposed master plan, and I will highlight the. So here you have an active open space here. There's a public trail connection to the public proposed greenway. Also a private trail connection here that connects to the public greenway, and also another private trail that connects here. And then you also have a recreational open space in this area, and just below you have an area called out open space for potential dog park. There are 2 access points to the site. There's 1 access point here at Creech Road, and then you have another at Creech Road and Jewel Street, and this connection on Jewel Street. So again, the site encompasses 42.4 acres. 4.2 acres are required for open space, and of the acreage for open space, 25% of that must be activated. And with that, a combination of conservation and recreation space is included. The conservation includes riparian buffers areas and conservation buffer areas. And then the recreation, again, includes qualifying open areas, amenities, and pedestrian trails. The site is not within the watershed protection area. However, it is subject to water quality and quantity requirements. There are 2 above-ground stormwater control measures. And the site will be served with City of Raleigh water. Water will connect from an existing 12-inch line from Creech Road, and then a 18-inch outfall for sewer along Little Arm Branch. A traffic impact analysis was not required for this proposal, as it did not meet the thresholds that are set by NC.DOT or the town of Garner. But the proposal does include dedicated southbound turn lanes, 1 at the Creech Road access point, and then 1 right at the access point at Creech Road and Jewel Street. And the Creech Road access will be restricted to a right turn only when exiting the development. There are FEMA designated floodplains, and the map shows that in green on the screen, and associated conservation buffers at the northern boundary of the project that extends southward through the east and central portion of the property. There were 2 neighborhood meetings that were held for this request. 150 properties were notified. The first meeting was held in December of 2024, and the second meeting was held in April of this year. There were 4 attendees at the first meeting and 2 at the second, and you have your meeting information attached to the staff report. Looking at it from the comprehensive land use plan, again, this site does not fall within a framework, but it is wedged between the neighborhood activity center and then the regional employment center. The land character type is neighborhood for the typology, and the development intensity is a level 2 area to strengthen. The staff evaluated this proposal with the comprehensive land use plan. 14 growth framework criteria were evaluated. 13 were strongly consistent, and one received one modest non-support, and that was due to the transportation choices. But it was an existing condition with limited pedestrian connectivity, and so it did not receive the strongest non-support rating. For the land use and community character consistency, 26 criteria were determined to be applicable or possible to meaningfully address. It received overall support. Staff noted that expanding housing options to accommodate a broader range of residents should be considered, and including greater variety in housing types, price points, and sizes to help it further align with the comprehensive plan. And one strong non-support was given due to the lack of commitment to Green Street solutions. And always with continued fine-tuning in response to this evaluation tool and additional public input and input from the commission this evening, staff will be likely to continue to support an overall finding of consistency. And you do have that consistency detail within your packet. During the public hearing on June 17th, there were a few questions and comments. They primarily related to the previous proposal for this site. Some of you may remember there was an application for this site last year, and it has significantly changed. And so questions about that really were raised during the public hearing, such as the neighborhood response to the change, how the unit count compares to the previous development. The previous development proposal included 312 multifamily units as well as a commercial building space, office space. There was a comment and appreciation given for the zoning district, the R4 zoning district is appropriate for the request. There was a question about the minimum square footage of the houses, and stemming from that question, the applicant has updated their conditions to reflect a larger minimum footprint to now 1,800 square feet of heated space. And there was a question regarding lot sizes and road improvements on Creech Road, and again, appreciation for the reduction in the unit count and overall improvement of the development plan. So staff has prepared a draft consistency statement that affirms the consistency with the town's adopted land use plan. On the screen, highlighted in yellow, you have the results of staff's analysis, which is consistent and recommend approval, and a draft motion for your consideration. So this concludes my presentation. The applicant is here to answer any questions you may have. And tonight, our duty and for your charge for the commission is findings of consistency and recommendation to approve or deny to town council, and then the case will be heard again before town council for findings of reasonableness and a decision to approve or deny. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And also, as I stated, the applicant is here as well to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Does the commission have any questions for staff at this time? If not, we can hear from our applicant. That's the case. Please state your name and affiliation and address for our record.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Isabel Maddox. I'm a land use attorney. My address is 3700 Glenwood Avenue, Raleigh, 27612. Here tonight representing CR 1306 and 0 LLC and the other applicant for this rezoning case. As Aaron so eloquently pointed out, this case started out over a year ago We came and we presented an apartment development, 312 apartment units. The neighborhood did not like it. We had a couple of meetings, neighborhood meetings before we had new neighborhood meetings, so they were very opposed. Council did not like it. Nobody liked it. To my client's credit, they did a major pivot to change this from 320 roughly apartment units to 37 single-family detached, and really proposing some very nice homes here with lots of architectural features, garages, a lot of architecturals that will make them each one different. There are significant open space here. The requirement is 4.2 acres. The actual is 15 acres. And lots of active areas with playground, dog park, pickleball, etc. A lot of greenway connections as well. I don't think we need to belabor all the points because Aaron discussed it very thoroughly, but I did want to make you aware of this major pivot done by my clients to make this more in keeping with what the overall neighborhood and the council seem to want, which is a lower key single family development. And with this, I called Aaron. Excuse me, sorry, Aaron's already done her part. Beth Blackman, our engineer for the project, just talk about the details.
Good evening, Beth Blackman, Timmons Group, 5410 Trinity Road, Suite 102, Raleigh, 27607. I've seen all of y'all lots of times. So, and we've talked about this project before when it was apartments and townhomes in the same area that we have now with single family. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. Aaron and Isabel have covered everything pretty detailed. We did add the enhanced landscape buffer for the homes backing up to Creech Road there at the intersection of Jewel Street. So that was an addition that we added before the council meeting. And then, as they pointed out, after the council meeting, we added the increased home square footage. So that was the only zoning condition that we changed after the council meeting. But we are proposing a couple of stormwater devices, open space, streets will be public, there'll be water and sewer for the neighborhood. Water is already existing in Creech. Sewer is already existing on the property as well. We will improve Jewel Street. So the frontage on our side will have curb and gutter and sidewalk. The whole street will be paved. Right now it is currently gravel, dirt. Technically it's a DOT street. So it will be paved, so at least the full width would be paved, and there'll be curb and gutter on our side. And then the frontage in Creech, where that enhanced buffer is, would also be improved with curb and gutter, sidewalk, and widened. The entrance through the middle is a public right-of-way currently, so that will be a Town of Garner Street, built to Town of Garner standards. And I'm here, Isabel's here, if anybody has any other questions for us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Blackman. Are there any questions for staff or our applicant at this time? Mr. Vola?
Yeah, trying to get my orientation here. There's something on the design that looks like a stub, but it isn't. It seems to be going to a property. I circled it because it would seem that would be a cul-de-sac, but I can't figure it out.
It is as if it was a cul-de-sac, but it's less than 150 feet. So a turnaround is not required. And we debated that one a few different times. A cul-de-sac obviously is huge, right? It takes up a lot of room.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do a flag lot, and this actually allows those two corner lots to like have a side entry garage by having that street in there. So that was what we proposed. It also gives you a break in the block face. Like I said, we had that odd little corner that there was no real good way to access it. So it is a very short street that really only there's 3 lots people would use.
It is amazing how much of this property will not be developed. Amazingly good. There's wetlands, there's conservation buffers, there's a stream. You seem to have done a nice job at protecting the naturalness that is there. There is a chunk of the property that says reserved by owner, do we have any notion of plans?
So when we first submitted that, that was actually all tree safe. So we were not going to go across the stream. We're not going to impact and go across the stream, other than Greenway, will have to be built and stuff like that. The town, thinking ahead, we don't need that for tree preservation from a percentage wise. What would like us not to count that as a required tree preservation area. So then in the future, when Wilmington Street is developed, that property actually may benefit the property on the other side, which gets kind of like triangular shaped. It might be something that could be used in the future, but there are no plans for that now, but we are not like counting it as any of our open space or preserved area.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple questions and comments. So the 25-foot buffers along the south of the property that are facing Creech Road, are those going to be replanted trees? Are they going to maintain the existing? Because there's quite a grade difference there. Are they going to try to hide those roof lines from Creech Road in some fashion?
So I would not want to tell you that they're going to be preserved just because we have to widen Creech Road. Yes, to the extent practical, we will preserve. But in the actual street yard buffer, it will probably have to be replanted. But yes, the hope is to leave trees in everybody's backyard.
I do want to commend the developer on coming up with this plan versus what we looked at previously. I do like the idea of more than one ridge line on the roof. I do have a concern about the secondary roofs only having a 4-inch minimum eave when the lower roof has a 12-inch minimum. I think that's going to look a little odd. Just suggesting they may want to look at mirroring what's on the lower roof. And the other question, I believe, is probably more of a town question. Has there been any consideration for the town to install curb and gutter along the east side of Jewel Street? So when this road is curb and guttered on the project side and they're going to pave it, would it not be beneficial to the town to actually put a little bit of money in and have this curb run, and then you have a nice new street with curb and gutter on both sides?
Well, I'll let them speak as well, but I'm not 100% certain if they have quite enough right of way. So that would also be something to consider.
Because it's currently built, what, DOT right-of-way limits?
It is, and it should be a 50 or 60 foot wide.
Yeah.
We're dedicating 5 feet, 2.5 or 5 feet, can't remember now. So we had to dedicate a little bit to do our half, so I would think the other side would also need to do a little bit to do their half. Because it's supposed to be the 55-foot major local. Yeah, so it's 50 now. It's supposed to be the 55, so we're dedicating 2.5. And they have to dedicate 2.5.
I think it would behoove the town to look at doing what's necessary to put curb and gutter on the other side of the street, and that has nothing to do with the applicant here this evening. But you're going to have a road that's going to be a new street, it's going to be paved, you have curb and gutter on both sides, you're going to control the stormwater better. I think that's something that maybe the town or council might need to look at, possibly invest a little bit. Just you're building a new road with curb on one side. Doesn't make sense. But that's all the comments I had. I think this is a good plan. I like the parks, the dog park, the open spaces, the recreational open space. I like the plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Banks, do you have any questions?
No questions, but commentary in terms of the open space is quite impressive from what was previously presented to the commission. I'm impressed with the dog park, just the general connections to the Greenway. So nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mills? Ms. Bishop, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah. I see here it says that there's going to be a Greenway connection. Is it connecting to any existing greenways at all?
No, so it's on the future greenway plan for a
Okay.
greenway to run north-south, and then the plan is turned, right? So north-south. Up to Wilmington Place was just approved north of us. So they have a greenway that runs east-west along the creek. And then this would go up and eventually, tie into it. And then this would eventually go south all the way to past the school and down to East Garner Road. But right now it doesn't connect anything, which is why we have a trail connection at both ends to provide kind of an ingress and egress. And so there's not kind of a dead end.
Got it. And so there's the potential to connect to Jurgen Park. Is that
One day, yes.
okay? And then my other question. So I actually agree with Mr. Carson as far as the gutter, especially since this is in a floodplain area, and especially with the recent amount of floods that we've had, it's definitely a concern. But yeah, I like the open space and recreational open space. And I also like the fact that it's only right turns out of the neighborhood as well.
Well, at Jill Street, that will be a left or a right.
Oh, okay.
Yes. The reason it's only a right out, a right out of the other one is because of sight distance going over the hill with the existing speed limit on Creech Road. It's not safe for anybody to make a left out.
Got it.
So.
Mr. Mills?
Do you know DOT's plans for Creech Road? Or they ultimately want to make it a two-lane road each direction, or just leave it?
So the town's plan for Creech Road is the DOT street, but the town's plan calls for it to be a 74-foot right-of-way, 75-foot right-of-way. I'll keep changing them. It's a ultimate 75-foot public right-of-way, major collector street with a 45-foot back-to-back. So that is a 3-lane section with curb and gutter and sidewalk on both sides.
Okay. And I guess at some point the developer reached out for these other houses, the front's Creech Road, and couldn't get a
We
offer
have
from them?
had one of those is a often participant at every one of our neighborhood meetings. It's our family home. She has no intention of moving. Some of them are rentals. There's been conversations, but it never went anywhere soon enough to do anything else about it.
Okay.
I'm sure people will call after it's built, and it's kind of hard.
Yeah. My only other question was the stormwater ponds. It didn't work out to have just one. The grades were
So
off.
there are two, actually, a skinnier one and a larger one, but yes, it should work out for the two.
Yeah, but I guess the grading on site or the way their existing grades are, you couldn't make it to one SM.
Oh, couldn't make it to one. I don't quite have enough room because of the floodplain conservation buffer to fit it all in one. And I would have a lot of extra space I would have to take away lots to make the one bigger, but I wouldn't be able to put lots where the other one is. So
Okay,
it made more sense to have two.
that's all for me.
Ms. Hodges?
I know it's early on, and I only bring this up because it was mentioned, but are there any renderings of what the homes may look like, or garages, anything yet?
We have talked about different things. I mean, everything would be very fitting in with the area, kind of southern architecture, but we did not. The developer, and they're actually the property owners, I don't know whether they're going to build them themselves or end up selling them to someone to build them. So there is no actual building plan. It's not like a national builder that has these plans, right?
Okay. Well, I'll add a few. I'll ask a few questions for you, and mostly some comments. One, I do appreciate the new layout. It is, I think, much more in keeping with the characteristic of the existing neighborhood, and for the existing residents along Creech Road to feel like they can remain
Right.
is really important to me, that a development should not be implemented in such a way that it causes an existing neighborhood or housing component to have to relocate. I think that's a negative for me. So the kind of surrounding what exists, and hopefully it also begins to create a component that even enhances the existing. So I appreciate that. I do appreciate also the stormwater devices. With what has been happening so randomly with our current storms, we want to make sure that any mitigation occurs to reduce any potential increase of flooding for this development and the neighbors. And so you feel pretty confident about that from this,
Yes.
bringing in new stormwater, new, impervious surface area, and that our devices will capture all coming off of, but then also the potential rising of the floodwaters and the floodplain.
Yeah, so this, we will meet all the town standards, capture the impervious for the, 25-year storm. The site is a significantly floodplain already. A lot of cases when we have developments, we're backing up to existing neighbors, right? So in this case, we are backing up to the floodplain. So our pond runoff, which will be mitigated, will go directly to the floodplain, which is also beneficial. So it is not going to have to go through some other property before it gets to the floodplain. So I think in this particular case, we have no issues.
It's good, really good to hear. Some of the conditions, Mr. Carson's already mentioned one about overhangs. I tend to have a pretty major concern about overhangs because of water intrusion and shade calculation. So I'm assuming that the secondary roofs are dormers or the like, and so there's kind of a proportion that begins to change from the 12-inch overhang that's standard, and then moving upward to the kind of more of an 8-inch overhang. So I would also suggest that we try to increase that overhang for the eaves and rakes of secondary roofs. It's mostly, again, because of movement of water and also for shade calculation. The cementitious siding, which I appreciate, but I do have concern of going from a cementitious material for siding to a PVC material. Those two materials have very different rates of change. And so I would suggest that we make a consistent language that trim boards are cementitious, just like any of the fibers, cementitious material for siding. That PVC material also begins to move and separate and have waving patterns. So can't change the design, but I would suggest that with the notion of keeping our units long-term maintenance, that would help a lot.
That's an area I'm not very familiar with. That is a very standard setup of materials. Like, we've used this on most of our rezonings. So somebody who knows more about that sort of stuff will have to guide me on that.
Totally okay. I would say take that back to your folks. But anytime you have two different materials, they're going to function differently. So that's one of my questions. And then the last major question is the 5 foot by 5 foot minimum porch. So that's I know it says minimum. Is there a larger?
Most of the various plans we sketched and talked about, well, not sketched, but talked about, had significant front porches. So I don't think you will have to be worried about just having the minimum.
Okay, that's good to hear. Porches, when I hear porches, especially when you say a more southern architectural aesthetic, the southern architectural aesthetic, even along the existing kind of character, are porches that we can actually utilize.
Right.
And there's usually kind of a distance and a width and depth that is actually able to sit on. So when we say kind of the southern porch, 5 foot by 5 foot to me is a stoop. And so when we say porch, at least a 6 feet depth for chairs to sit, and at least a good 7 feet, 8 feet wide for, the doors on one side and you can sit on the other side. So when we say porch, I have a very specific language of how we say that, but also because of the existing kind of ranch houses that have a space to actually sit in that existing characteristic would be useful. So I take that as. And so was there any, this is the last question, was there any additional conversation about the size of units? The 1,800 square feet is shown as the minimum, but to meet, more in alignment to our Garner Forward. Do you think there's kind of more, small, medium size, and then?
So that was an increase from the town council meeting. At the town council meeting, it was 1,500 square feet. Because of the potential for like a ranch, or even something with an unfinished basement, we're trying not to go too large, to have some options for future home buyers. But in general, when we were in the town council meeting, we were talking about, we're thinking it's a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot house. Like I said, we just wanted to give ourselves a little bit of room because that is heated square footage, and make sure we didn't end up with a plan that was just too short, right?
So you have so it sounds like you have kind of a maximum size that you are also aligning to. Is that right? 'Cause this says
That was just the general comment that the property owner said when we were talking about the square footage. So
maybe.
I wouldn't say there's a maximum. The general is thinking that it would be 2,000 to 3,000 square feet.
Okay. Just.
I'm sure that if somebody wanted a bigger house, they would be glad to build a bigger house. So.
Okay.
And like I said, you also have the potential for some basements, which would also make it naturally a bigger house, or could be a bigger house one day.
Okay.
If it wasn't finished.
Okay. Yeah. Just looking at our consistency of our comprehensive plan and trying to find ways to match our character consistency with just those small moments of 18 to 2,000, 18 to 2,400. We know that there's a minimum. Is there a maximum? And small, medium size that gives the opportunity to kind of to list that.
I mean, I think this is a neighborhood unlike most of what you're seeing, right? These are larger lots, generally like 75 feet wide, 12,000 square feet, kind of on average. So I expect that the houses will also be larger. But we're trying to make sure we have some flexibility since the developer is not a home builder normally, so they don't know if they're going to build the homes or, get somebody else to build the homes.
Okay, I think those are all my questions. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, then for us to make final statements, we need a motion to either approve or not approve to have some further discussion. Oh, actually, do we have anyone that is in favor or not in favor of this proposal that we need to have heard from our audience? Seeing none, now is there a motion of consistency?
Guess I'm confused. Do we have a motion first on consistency and then one on approval?
There's a draft consistency statement that you can accept and refer to with your draft motion to recommend approval that's in the packet. So if you take the consistency statement that's drafted as something you believe, you can recommend, or you can make the motion that is drafted to recommend approval in the packet. Is that a good way to explain it, Aaron? You make the motion to recommend approval or denial. In that motion, you accept the consistency statement.
Okay, well, As a straw man, I move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement drafted herein as our own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans and recommend approval of case number CZMP 24006 to Town Council.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'd like to request an amendment to that, if
Okay.
possible. At the end of that consistency statement, to request staff and town council look at the feasibility of adding curb under the town's guidance to the east side of Jewel Street. And feasibility.
Interrupt, Terry Jones, town attorney. I believe that should be a separate motion, that shouldn't be part of the consistency and recommended approval of this plan, as that's an independent action, not responsible, that the developer wouldn't be responsible for. But you can certainly make a second motion if you'd like to, and that information can be presented to council.
Okay, I withdraw the amendment then, and we'll just move forward with Mr. Voiland's motion. So I'll second his motion.
Sounds good. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other discussion before we take a vote? Okay, well, we're ready to vote.
That is the motion on the floor to accept the consistency statement drafted therein and recommend approval to town council. I will call the vote. Shane Banks.
Aye.
Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jihan Hodges.
Aye.
Ben Mills.
Aye.
Michael Voiland.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you so much.
So following up on my last statement, I'd like to, under the guidance of Ms. Jones, I'd like to make a motion that we request staff and town council to look at the feasibility, both in right-of-way and cost, of course, to include curb and gutter along the east side of Jewel Street, separate from this previously approved motion.
And I'm going to say the south side of Jewel Street because the
South.
plan is turned. Is that okay?
South side, yes, sorry.
All right. So the motion on the floor is, Mr. Carson, that you ask staff and council to study the feasibility to add curb and gutter to the south side of Jewel Street in what the town can do and look at. Is that fair to say, if I word that
Yes.
a little more formal? All right.
Well, part of it may be a right-of-way restriction, part of it could be cost
Yeah, what's
prohibitive,
feasible
but
and
just
not.
to review the feasibility of it.
Sure. So we have that motion from Mr. Carson. Do we have anyone that would like to second that?
I will second that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hodges. So we have a motion on the floor, and I'll call the vote. Mr. Banks?
Aye.
Ms. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Carson?
Aye.
Mr. Jefferson?
Aye.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Voiland?
Aye.
All right, that's 7 ayes. Mr. Carson's motion passes.
Thank you so much. We have approved those to go to council. Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate your time and your changes. Next on our agenda is our residential SUP threshold modification review. I will turn it over to staff.
Okay, good evening again, commissioners. Today we have a very, I think, small, well, I don't say small, but focused text amendment package for you to consider. Just as a little bit of background, over the last 5 to 6 years, there has been considerable discussion and inquiries made from the development community about our requirement that requires any project that is over 200 residential units to go through a special use permit process. As you may recall, special use permits are not something that you see. It is something that goes directly to the town council for approval. Many of these projects typically go through a rezoning, but not everyone does. For those of you who, I'm trying to think if anybody's actually been on the commission, that goes back to the old ordinance. There was a time when if the property was zoned correctly or in a manner that allowed for the residential development to take place by right, it used to be that residential subdivisions in those particular circumstances actually were approved by the Planning Commission. That was, for one reason or another, that was done away with during the streamlining, and those now are a staff level approval. I did provide for you a listing of projects here on the first page of your staff report that shows projects that have gone through both. In 6 out of the 7, or there's 7 out of those 8, let me start there. 7 out of those 8 were apartment projects. And then 6 of those 7 apartment projects, there had not been any additional conditions that were added as part of that SUP process. But there again, there are some cases where additional conditions were added by the council. So those are highlighted for you as well. Proceeding to page 2 of your report, you'll see that we currently have 3 projects that are at some stage in the review pipeline. Village at Garner Station, Homestead at Bryan Farms, and Bethel Green, that have been through the rezonings portion and would currently require that they come back for a special use permit. I believe some of them are proceeding regardless of what happens with this particular text amendment, but it's possible that 1 or 2 of them may also be waiting to see what the outcome may be. Council asked for some review of what other jurisdictions do and require in similar circumstances. So at first, we did a review of peer communities in the greater Raleigh area. So those that are similar in size to us. For the most part, SUPs are not required by any of our peers, except in very limited circumstances. Nobody has a general, if you're this many, you have to also have a special use permit. Apex, it's strictly tied to townhomes. Holly Springs does not, although they do require certain residential projects to go through a conditional zoning process. So that is something unique to some jurisdictions, is that when you go to their use table, rather than just permitted by staff or permitted with a special use permit, some of them do structure their zoning districts in such a way that you have to go through the conditional zoning process. For us, it just happens that the majority of cases do, because most land in Garner's jurisdiction that is not developed is zoned as resident or rural agriculture. And so they have to, come to us for a rezoning. But in some jurisdictions that who are a little more proactive with their zoning prior to development, they will write that into their use table that, hey, but if you want to do this particular use, you do have to get rezoned regardless. You'll see Fuquay, Varina, and Wake Forest. It really only kicks in for certain developments that are proposing manufactured homes. Again, Clayton is another one of those jurisdictions like Holly Springs that occasionally will require that conditional zoning process. Council also asked us to do a little more. research across the state, so both the town attorney's office and the planning department cast a question out there amongst our colleagues around the state as to what their requirements may be. So you'll see that there's 4 that in some fashion may require, again, an SUP for single-family detached dwellings. It was far more common, though, for those jurisdictions to require a special use permit process for townhomes and apartments or multifamily. Hillsborough, for example, they do have a requirement that if a single-family subdivision comes forward that has 20 units or more, 20 units for Hillsborough seems kind of small, admittedly by comparison. When I called their staff, the response that I got was, I honestly don't know why. It's just been that way for a really long time. So there was not anybody on staff currently that could recall as to why that particular threshold had been chosen in Hillsborough. Maggie Valley, again, talking about a small jurisdiction up there in western North Carolina, that is a very small jurisdiction. So any residential development that's over 10 acres. And again, admittedly, 10 acres in Maggie Valley, that's probably a really big deal. It would have a tremendous impact on the community as a whole. So that kind of makes sense to me. Henderson County, up there, I think that's south of Buncombe, Hendersonville, if I'm not mistaken. They have a 300 unit threshold for single family detached. So again, just some background information, another way of kind of looking at it to see who does what and where we could find out a little bit as to why. Very few jurisdictions had changed their process in the last couple of years. Most of them have had the systems and processes that they've had for quite some time. Mills River was kind of the exception to that, where they did notice that they used to use an SUP process, but actually they switched to mandatory conditional zoning about 2 years ago. Their staff noted that their council, given some of the court precedents that is out there in the North Carolina court system, that their council felt compelled to approve unless there was something very specific that came up during that quasi-judicial process that they could really hang their hat on to deny. And I do think there is some credence to that special use permits are kind of, to a degree, in that realm of they are to be approved unless there's a valid reason not to approve. So they felt that they had more flexibility to judge a project in a legislative rezoning process much more liberally, probably, than in the special use permit process. One of the other jurisdictions I forget which one it was, but they actually did the opposite. And again, it was just kind of the preference of the local board as to which one they preferred. I will say that was in, I think, what was probably a more development-friendly, wanting to encourage growth, a community that didn't have a lot. And they felt that, and an SUP process can do this, it can limit the public input. Public is always still welcome, to give their thoughts and comments, but that quasi-judicial process can be narrowed more carefully by the applicant to only consider testimony and things that the person coming up to speak is actually qualified to speak about. So again, there's all these little nuances as to what works and what a jurisdiction is really trying to accomplish. So staff has had several discussions with the town council, and you'll see here in section 2 of the report that we talked about 4 different potential options. One was, of course, no change, just to leave things as they are. And to the opposite extreme, there's an option to just repeal that subsection A2 in full. Option C was something where we decided we could potentially focus on exempting or not requiring the SUP process if a project has gone through a conditional rezoning. And I think that's the feedback from the development community, is that they feel, hey, we've already been through a conditional rezoning, at least if they've done a tier 2, where you've actually seen a master plan. You've seen what the subdivision is going to look like. A tier 1 doesn't do that, so we've specifically focused on tier 2. So the option under C would be to remove that requirement for single family development that has gone through a master plan process, but then also tie it down a little bit further so that if the applicant later on wanted to come back and modify what was approved during the zoning process, currently the UDO allows for them a 10% wiggle room. So if somebody came in with 400 residential units, they could go up to 440, or they could come down to 360. That's a pretty wide gap. I mean, that's 80 units total spread. So there was discussion about that being potentially too much before it would have to come back and go through the process again. So staff has proposed that under that option, we would narrow that to 5%. So that same 400 unit development at rezoning could go up to 420 or down to 380. But if it exceeded that in either direction, they would have to go back through the rezoning process. And so both council and planning commission would see it again. So that just kind of speaks to the idea that when you do see it at rezoning, you are pretty much seeing what you're going to get. And then option D was to kind of set different thresholds. Potentially keeping the 200 unit requirement for townhomes and multifamily, but raising the single family to 500. That does create the need for a little more thought if that's the route we wanted to go, because what do you do then in the case of projects that have both? West Garner Road would be a good example. They're near downtown, where I know that they have, way more than 200 of the townhomes and apartments. If they do introduce a single family, which the zoning would permit them to do, what do you do in that case where the single family is under the threshold, but the townhomes and the apartments are over? Do you break it up? What do you do? We could solve it, I'm sure, but it is a little more complex. So the proposed language that went to the public hearing was pretty much option C. And so you'll see that in pages 4 and 5. And I will say here again, this is something that could be discussed further. And I take exception to what I may have said before, because I think I may have said that wrong. The current language would apply to any residential. We could further discuss whether we want to narrow it more. So this could be single family, townhomes, apartments, whatever the case may be. We could discuss potentially doing it for some and not the others. But at this point, the draft language is for any residential that has gone through a tier 2 rezoning process. So you've seen the master plan, you know what it's going to look like, that those would be removed from having to go through a subsequent special use permit process. Combined with the proposal to modify 4.8.2, which again takes that 10% unit wiggle room and cuts it in half to 5. So when looking at the comprehensive plan, what does it have to say? Not a lot. Admittedly, a plan, a comprehensive plan looks more at the outcomes and what development is expected to look like, and does talk less about process. But there were a few sections that did, and so I highlighted those for you. Pages 112 and 115 of the comprehensive plan did talk about process to a degree. Page 112, though, particularly focuses really on infill development. And when the plan talks about infill development, it is usually not talking about projects that are 200 or more units in size. We're talking things that are geographically and numerically smaller. Not that a huge development couldn't be the last one in a particular part of town, but we still really don't often consider that infill. It just happens to be the last part. The other reference in page 115 really had to do with incentivizing affordable housing. So again, not really the focus of where this request was coming from, but that is definitely something for Garner to think about. So again, not a lot really said about what our processes should be, but a couple of indications of, in certain cases, where the plan would encourage us to review our processes and see if maybe there's something we can do to better attack those specific issues of infill development and affordable housing. So we did draft a consistency statement for you that kind of covers that in a nutshell. And we do have a couple of options highlighted in yellow. Those two that are highlighted in yellow are based on adopting that draft consistency statement, but then one to recommend approval to the council or one to recommend denial. The one for recommending denial does, if you decide to go that route, we would ask you to state your findings and supported, reasonings as to why. And with that, I will wrap up my part of the discussion of this proposed amendment with you and open it up to the floor for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. That was a lot of technical info for us to think about. A lot of kind of future forward things for us to think about. And a lot of things for us to make sure that we make the decision that's going to best support our community and our residents as well as support our development at the same time. Is there any discussion, any questions, staff, yes. Mr. Carson?
As a member of the Affordable Housing Task Force, I sat in on the coalition meeting, and their main comments were the cost of going through an SUP and the additional time it takes. But I think it's very important for the town, the planning commission, to maintain some control on the growth. And I think the SUPs help with that, as opposed to shortening the process. I think we need to maintain some control. As I read C, I guess if we approve C, that also means D is also accepted as part of that. Mr. Triesenberg, is that correct?
No. C and D were completely different.
Okay, because
Yeah,
if
C-
I read that last sentence of section C, where it reduces the dwelling by 5% or greater, and then it says amend section 2 under D. So
That's how I first read it, but then I realized that they were separate. Correct?
Yeah.
so that and okay, so it's just C as it stands by itself.
Maybe it was a typo.
Correct.
I just read C when it ends in and.
Oh, as a choice, I guess. A, B,
Yeah.
C.
The and between C and D is just the listing of A, B, C, and D.
Just grammar. Just grammatical.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're just okay. So it's just C without D. Okay.
Right.
I think that we need to keep some control on the development. We are one of the fastest growing towns in the U.S., and I'm supportive of C as is written. I think we need to continue with the SUPs in a limited fashion that they set out.
Anyone else have massages?
Yeah, so this does not take in, or the current language take in, lot size acreage. It's just for the number of dwelling units.
Like relating to how some municipalities it's
Yes,
acreage of
yeah.
development. This is
This is just looking at,
Correct. Yeah, there are standards by which if they modify the acreage that it would also need to come back through, but we're not proposing any adjustments to that.
Have any?
But I will say, sorry, I will say generally, if a project adds geographic area, it has to come back.
but we would know, to your point, for ahead of time what the geographic area was and how many dwellings
Correct.
before. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, so is this hindering Garner's growth? Like, have any developers actually said, "Hey, we're not coming here and we're going to Apex because of this at all"?
I can't say that anybody hasn't come. I got that question also from council, but that's not typically something that we as staff are really going to know unless somebody just explicitly tells us that. There may be some, I do know there are some folks, like when a rezoning comes in, it's not always done by a builder. There's usually a builder that's in mind, probably, but not in every case. I do know some builders who have passed on a particular subdivision that's been approved in Garner, but then another builder usually has always come in. But as far as somebody who just said, I'm not coming to Garner, I don't know. I think on the one hand, you could say, well, we can see who is in Garner, and then there's the question of, well, why hasn't that builder come to Garner? I don't have the answer to that. Is it our process, or is it just we're not in their geographic area of focus? It's hard to say.
Thanks. Mr. Mills? Nothing. Any question? Or?
No, not at this time.
I think there's kind of I think there needs to be a method, and not kind of an open-ended process, in order for us to make sure that, our first concern are our residents, and making sure that we are doing the best for our residents in our town. Anything that's new doesn't exist. But what affects our existing community is important. And for us to not be able to speak about that, or to have them speak about it, we're taking away a little bit of their voice, I think. And so that's something that I definitely don't want to see. But I do think that coming to us for a rezoning that we have already seen in a tier 2 makes sense, that we've reviewed what should be done, like what is being planned. And unless some major change happens that requires it to come back to us, I don't know that it necessarily makes sense that if that project is in keeping with our tier 2 rezoning approval, that it needs to necessarily come back again unless there's a change. And we have those written, that if there is a change to those elements, that it does need to come back if it's been modified.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, and I do think it's important for y'all to realize that this amendment would not have any effect on your role in the process. It's going to come through a rezoning regardless of whether this is approved or not. Your part in the process is going to stay constant no matter what. It really is, does it go back to council for that extra, well, they would say extra, we might say it's just routine. But again, for them to have to go back to that. And there's valid arguments on both sides.
I definitely see both. But I definitely don't want to, as Mr. Carson said, kind of take away the ability for us to be more meaningful about what we are trying to accomplish for the town. I think that's in our responsibility, especially when it comes to affordable housing. If we don't look at that and say that it's missing or it's needed or there needs to be more, then who's going to do it?
If I may ask a question, because I think this may get to something that council may be interested in some feedback on. Do you think there's any reason to kind of separate out kind of from the evidence that maybe we see in around the state, where some folks are keeping a little extra tight control on townhomes and apartments, but when it comes to single family detached, maybe that can be a little more streamlined? I do think, because right now, the way it's proposed, it would apply to any residential, getting rid of the SUP if it's been through a tier 2. But maybe there is some good reasons for keeping it if the project has townhomes and apartments, but if it is just single family only and it's been through a tier 2, that's okay not to have to come back for a special use permit, but keep the special use permit for townhomes and apartments.
I think that a unit is a unit. And so if it's 200 of this, it's 200 of the other. It's still, I think, in my opinion, I would rather see it than to kind of start separating piece by piece this I don't know. I think that it may, I don't know. Staff wise, how complex does that begin to get?
I don't think that's as complex. I think it's just more, there is a certain fundamental thing about single family detached homes in North Carolina. Any property that exists today, you're entitled to build one single family detached dwelling. There just seems to be a lot more, comfort in the idea that folks should be able to build a single family detached. But as soon as you're going to try to, up that density a little bit and do a townhome or do an apartment complex, or for some folks, that's a very hard line, yeah, or an important one to consider. But then, like you say, on the other flip side, a unit's a unit. But
I think that when it's one, or someone's building two, or someone's building five, that's a huge difference than 300 perhaps.
I just think it's a good tool in the toolbox to allow council to guide development as they see fit, as opposed to just having somewhat of a free-for-all. It's there. We're in an enviable position where Garner's growing, it's growing fast, and I think we need to have an ability, either as the commission on some of the stuff that we vote on, or the council, to at least have that extra step of a review in having the SUP. That's my opinion.
What was some of our public comment? Did we have any public comment?
I want to go back to the 6 or 7 cases that you presented here. So, is my understanding that out of these, there's only been one that went back for special use permit of the ones that were already initially approved, or?
so all of, on page 1, all of those 8 did go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And during that process, was there anything that came up that wasn't initially?
Right. So, I'll point you to the second sentence of the last paragraph. Bennett Assemblage Apartments North did have 4 additional conditions added. Again, that was an apartment project. So one of the conditions was that they add elevators. A second was that they add EV parking stations, added bicycle parking, and they also committed to a certain percentage of affordable housing units. That was not, for whatever reason, that was not discussed at the conditional zoning hearing. Could have been. Those weren't things that necessarily had to be. And so I don't know if it was really, we knew that the SUP process was there, so maybe some of that was left. Or maybe it was just, these are some things that we thought about. Because I do know we were having quite a bit of discussions about apartment projects during that time. So I can't really speak as to why they came up in the SUP versus not the conditional zoning hearing. But that was a case where 4 things were added. And then in Cambria, which was the single family subdivision case, there were 2 additional conditions. One was a reduction in the number of units for part of the subdivision and converting one of the roadway connections to a one-way.
So in those cases, if we didn't have that second tier, the special conditions, you could have approached them. They could simply say, no, you already approved it, and that would have been that.
Right.
Okay.
So that is an important distinction, that during the legislative zoning hearing, any condition has to be agreed to by the applicant. During the special use permit hearing, council can just impose if they have the supporting reasons.
But with our design modifications, that would still be the case, right? Even with this option C, but those changes being made after the tier 2 zoning, they would still have to come back to review that, right?
Yeah, if they wanted to change something after the zoning and the SUP process wasn't there, or it was something that was addressed during zoning and they wanted to change it, that would have to come back, yes.
And all of these 6 items are mostly covered in those maybe not the bicycle parking.
That was a case where that was under the old ordinance. And so now the new ordinance, we do have bicycle parking requirements and we do have electric vehicle parking requirements. So yeah, there's a lot. Each one of those cases had its own kind of moving parts to it. Some of those would not have to be addressed anymore today because the ordinance has
It
changed.
already has changed.
If we happen to adopt C and later realize that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do, can we can we meet back here again for another proposed text change? I mean, not necessarily quickly, but down the line.
Right. Yeah, we always have the option to amend the ordinance.
I just feel like you can't sit here and think of all the circumstances that may come up until something is implemented. And I'm sure people will figure out ways to use it to their benefit. So that would be my only concern. Or
Well, in some ways, it gives them the kind of ability to kind of share everything with us during the Tier 2 zoning that you intend to do, so you don't have to come back again. In some way, that's an incentive to plan it out more forward, so that we have it all taken care of. As long as any modifications that are going to affect the zoning that we've approved, would have to come back for review. I think it'll be, just changing a two-way to a one-way could be a really big problem if we don't make sure that it's done properly, right, in a 300-unit development. And a developer decides to reduce the number of affordable housing units because they feel like their cost is different. Well, then we told you that that's not the case. We need that in. So if that, we don't want to see that either. But that's listed here. So I think, right? Does our affordable housing component fall under the design modification? That if there was a change to affordable housing.
So if they made that condition, and they wanted to differ from it, we'd have to look at exactly the condition that they offered for that particular case and determine if that's substantial, the change that they want to make is substantial or just inconsequential. And we would use those parameters in the UDO to try to determine that.
Okay.
But depending on how they would word it.
Would be dependent on how we address it. Any other comments or statements? Those are all good questions. And
I have one question. Actually, it said it was the town council brought this forward. Is that something they voted to do, I guess? Or is it just one member?
Maybe not super formally, but during the work sessions, there was a consensus of a majority that to bring something forward.
Okay.
I would not say that it was unanimous in any sense, but there were at least 3 members who did go on record as saying, let's talk about C.
Okay.
Mr. Jefferson, I might could address the council.
yes, Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you. My name's Buddy Gupton. I live in Garner. I'm the mayor. First of all, I'm very impressed with the detailed orientation that all of you have and the understanding that all of the commission members here have on a very complex issue.
there's a lot of moving parts. I can speak in a very general way for council in saying no one on council is interested in losing any control over the quality of our projects. We are in the driver's seat today, 10th fastest growing city in America. We are in a mood to demand more and better. Let me make that crystal clear. Nobody is trying to do less. We want to do more and better. We're just trying to remove one redundancy that we see. And just to rephrase what Jeff and his staff have already said, if this is a residential rezoning that has come as a tier 2 with a detailed master plan, like the master plan we just saw on the project on Creech Road, where we see every house size, we see every lot, we see every dog park, we see every road improvement. If we see that, whether it's 37 homes like that one, or whether it's 201 homes, we feel, the council feels, if we've seen that in that level of detail, then we're ready to make a decision. Council has also become a little leery of this SUP process, which is quasi-judiciary, which means it's a legalese court process, as opposed to the more informal legislative process we often go through. Looking back on one of those apartment projects we mentioned, that were mentioned here, that at the SUP portion, the council decided, well, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see that, I'd like to see elevators. And the developer just stood up and said, I'll just do it, just let me get this through. In cold detachment later, on the advice of our attorney, we should not have made those particular decisions at that point in the process. That SUP process does not come before you guys. All the zoning does. Every piece of zoning, every master plan you'll still see, you'll still approve on. But this quasi-judicial, and I think Jeff, Terry, anybody correct me, but I think there's 7 issues that can be addressed, and not by the public, not by the neighbors, but only by people with that specific training and background. And so they're not really talking about the big picture, they're talking about details, and the public's not even allowed to speak at SUP, quasi-judicial, and the SUPs do not come back through this commission unless I'm mistaken. So just to rehash, your council has high expectations. Your council wants to see more and better. They want to eliminate the redundancy of something that we and the planning commission has already been through and said, yes, 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 all looks good. Why do we have to have a court trial with attorneys and paid experts taking another 100 to 150 days and costing maybe another $50,000 to $100,000 to the developer? We think he could spend that money better improving his development than relitigating the thing. I don't want to put words in the developers or the engineer's mouth, but we want to keep control. The council wants to keep control, but we don't want to add undue costs for what we see as minimal or very little improvement. So we're for option C, not D, C. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your concern on all this stuff. I'll sit down and shut up now.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gupton, for that. That really helps us to understand where this is all coming from. And I can't speak for the commission necessarily, but I think that we would not want to hinder the process if we have already reviewed something that makes sense without any major change, unless I'm also speaking out of turn for the commission. But sounds like the resounding similarity from our comments. Well, if I don't want to push this any faster. I want to make sure that we're thinking about this, because we do have the option of pushing this decision to the next meeting. But if we feel that this is good for us to continue a process of reviewing our work without making any major additional work for our applicants.
I'll make a motion if we're ready.
I'm ready for a motion if we're ready for it.
I move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement drafted herein as our own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans, and recommend approval of case number C TA-25-001 to the town council as appropriate in the public interest noted as option C.
That is the text as written, correct?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. So that's the one that is part of this.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Is there a second for Mr. Carson's motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Banks. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion before we take a vote?
All right, there's the motion on the floor. I'll call the vote. Shane Banks.
Aye.
Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
G. Hen Hodges.
Aye.
Ben Mills.
Aye.
Michael Boylan.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you so much. We have passed that motion. We are now in reports of planning director and commission.
Yes. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, and text amendments are always, to me, harder. So appreciate your thoughtfulness and talking through that. In terms of what's happened since your last meeting, which was actually back in May, not a whole lot of activity. On May 20th, council did consider the action on the rezoning at 5828 Fayetteville Road. If you'll remember, that was the little light industrial piece. That was approved on a vote of 5-0 from RA, Rural Agricultural, to Light Industrial. At the work session on May 27th, we did have some discussion about the R8 zoning district. Some of you may be familiar with some of that. The R8 district, there's no minimum density for that district, but the way the district is written kind of implies that it would be used differently than how it's being used thus far. So there was general agreement that we need to change some things about the R8 district, and so I will actually be bringing back a discussion about some amendments to the residential portions of our UDO that would help to better implement some of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And we're going to bring that R8 discussion potentially into that package. So again, I'll be presenting that to them at their work session this month. So if you're so inclined, feel free to listen in. On June 3rd, there was just a discussion of the text amendment that we just finished up. And so that will now be going back to council for a decision. And then on June 17th, we had the public hearing for Creech Road, which again you heard tonight, and will now be going back for a decision. And then they also considered a decision on the Renmore subdivision off of Clifford and New Bethel. That was approved on a vote of 3-2. In June, towards the later part of the month, I think I had told you in May that we were getting ready to hopefully issue the transportation plan update request for qualifications. We did get that put out, and I think it was July 3rd, right before the 4th, was our deadline to receive qualifications. We did get responses from 4 different firms here in the Raleigh area. So we do have an expectation that if we can get through the review process and selection process, that we should have a consultant on board to start in September. Have not decided on the final format of how that's all going to work. That will be part of the discussions that we will be having with the respondents. It is entirely possible that we could just, I think the comprehensive plan project went about as well as it could have from a public input and planning commission and council input. For those of you who weren't here, both the planning commission and the council served as kind of the advisory board, the full group. So that's possible we may do that again. Other options may be where we ask you to appoint a couple of representatives to serve on an advisory board. But again, we're looking to ramp that up in September. I did want to give you just a little bit of an idea of what we put out preliminarily as kind of the scope for our transportation plan. We do currently have 2 plans that are still officially on the books. We have our 2010 transportation plan that is still official in some capacity. And if I can type in my password, that would help. We did do an update to the transportation plan as part of our previous comprehensive plan update back in 2016, 2017. It was not a complete rewrite, though. We did not have enough funding earmarked to do a complete rewrite at that time. So currently the way things work for transportation is if it's in the 2017 plan, we follow that. If there's something that comes up through review that the 2017 plan doesn't address, then we go back to the 2010 plan. So council did budget for a complete rewrite this time. And so as part of that, obviously one of the things we're going to do is ask the consultant to consolidate. We don't want 2 versions of maps hanging out that we have to consult. So we're going to get all the maps and recommendations consolidated into that one document. We are also looking at various forms of what I would call origin and destination analysis, whether it's from outside of Garner into Garner, outside of Garner through Garner, from one part of Garner to another part of Garner. We're really trying to get some insights from this version of the plan as to why people are coming to Garner, how many are coming, where they're coming from, and really try to drive home for folks. You know, we all know congestion is an issue. It is everywhere. How much of that is really self-imposed and how much of that is just imposed because of things that are happening elsewhere that we have no control over. So really trying to get some output products that help us understand how the traffic's moving through and where it's coming from and where it's going. So that was a big portion of what we put out there is what we were looking for. That is kind of a specialized thing. So we want to make sure that folks have access to the data and can really present that to us in a way that's easy to understand. The other thing that kind of came out of our staff discussions, we invited other departments to sit in and help us draft this RFQ. And so one of the other things that really came up was the topic of safety and safety from all aspects. It's not really something that previous plans have addressed in much detail. So we want the plan to kind of get at addressing, you know, perception versus reality, digging into crash data that's available and helping us kind of bring that to the forefront to understand where our problem spots really are in Garner. Maybe identifying some hot spots where the consultant could dig in with a safety lens and say, you know, here's some recommended improvements to this stretch of road or this particular intersection that would really be helpful. And of course, the all-important cost estimates that go along with that work. School zone best practices. We did participate in we were, I think, one of the first communities in the state to participate in a school safety zone study. We partnered and did some work at Vandora Springs Elementary. So kind of bringing that forward into the plan and doing some additional work on that. And then also traffic calming. We seem to talk about that a lot. What's really the best? What works? What doesn't work? And trying to be more proactive in that regard and forward thinking rather than being reactive after the development happens. What can we really do on the front end to try to address that? Finally, a couple of the other things that we threw out there was, again, talking about connectivity, looking at the benefits and the costs that come with connectivity in various situations, and trying to come up with some definitive kind of recommendations on that everybody can hopefully get behind. And then finally, kind of right-of-way management. And when we say right-of-way management, we're really talking about working with what we have from curb to curb. It's increasingly almost cost prohibitive to try to widen roads these days, particularly the secondary routes, just particularly because of the way some of the formulas are set up at the state level. They just, don't reward those kind of applications. It's already limited funding. And so one of the things that we thought we would have this plan potentially work on is, okay, what are some strategies that we as the town can use that don't require widening, work with what we have, and how best to try to use that, whether, is the vehicle always the most important for every road in Garner, or there's some roads where we want to, potentially take some vehicle capacity away and add better sidewalks or better side paths and bike facilities. The bicyclists, admittedly, we haven't spent a lot of time in years past talking much about them or how to accommodate them. I do get the sense that there are more people who are biking or would like to bike around Garner. So I think that is a question we do want to put out there and try to get some movement on for how do we accommodate cyclists better in Garner. And then finally, also, let's dig into transit. We have a lot of transit-related projects that Garner's not necessarily leading the way on, but they are things that are happening to us and around us by other, regional agencies. And so how can we start to kind of gather all that information together and come up with a clearer picture of where Garner does want to put its resources to build on what is happening around us and take advantage more so of the Wake Transit Plan and those tax dollars that are coming with what we're paying and contributing to that in Wake County. If any of you are interested in really digging your teeth into this while we're going through the selection process, I am more than happy to share all of the information with you and would welcome you to send me any comments that you have. I am doing a review and scoring of these, as well as 6 of my colleagues from around the town. But if you do want to dig in, if it's something you're really interested in, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to share the materials with you and take your comments.
Right.
I'm excited about that. I've always had an interest in transit and trying to help the connectivity of Garner. Has Garner considered also a pedestrian bridge? Because I noticed there's a lot of large intersections, and lately there's been some pretty horrific crashes at those intersections.
Yeah.
To the point where I wouldn't even feel safe walking across. And there's been multiple times where I was like, oh, I would walk, but you're walking essentially across a major highway.
No, I think that kind of input is what hopefully the consultant, in having some one-on-ones or small groups with you, where maybe some of those areas we can elevate those to a more detailed discussion about what we can do, whether it's a bridge or something else. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, definitely would love to participate where I can. Transit is really important. Try to hammer that into my students. So I think we need to kind of get ahead of that.
The last thing I have, unless there's questions on that, we've had 2 vacancies left, as I say. We are happy to report that we have filled one of those, and we do have a staff member who will be joining us Monday, the 21st, on Aaron's team. So Aaron and Thomas will go from being a team of 2 to a team of 3. And perhaps in another month or so, we may have hopefully good news to have them at a complete team of 4 or at least further along in that direction. So look forward to introducing him at the next meeting.
Thank you for the work on it. Any comments from Commission?
I've got a question on another topic, if that one was done, sorry.
Go to Mr. Friesenberg if he's done with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. That's all I had.
That's all we have.
Okay. Got a question for Ms. Jones. Do you have any update on the NC House Bill 765? I think we discussed that maybe 3 months ago.
So probably not a good update, but my understanding is that bill didn't go anywhere, but most of its provisions were put into is it the swimming pool bill?
Yes.
So there was a small bill about, you can't make this stuff up. There was a small bill where it is now a very large bill, and we're continuing to monitor that. There are some bills you may have heard have been signed into law. Some have been vetoed by the governor. So we continue to track those, and we'll be doing a report to council on the session laws that have passed and their impacts. And as they relate to planning and development, we will share that so that Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment can be aware of those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Boylan?
The social media site Nextdoor can be very interesting. Has there been any overtures from Publix moving into the White Oak area?
I do understand that they are one of 2 or 3 grocers that may be considering the first part of the new development across from the existing White Oak Shopping Center.
Yeah.
But nothing confirmed.
Nothing confirmed. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rumors, always rumors. This is the place to get it all figured out. Hear about it, for sure. Are there any other commission needs or comments? Okay, well, hearing none, then we will call our meeting adjourned.